industry. So very dedicated. So he met our company. We'll hear a little bit more about our company. But I'd like to share that about Brigham, because he went from 700 square feet and 7 pianos to a bigger hall with 23 pianos, to a showroom of about 4,000 square feet in an industrial park, clean, nice, appropriate to this. And I have to say, I don't know, and I know not them all, but I know a good amount of them all. Seen another piano professional who has done this type of growth, healthy growth, that I know is based on a good foundation in such a short period of time. And I'm probably going to refer back to this over time, because it's a combination of hard work, more hard work, maybe another hard work, good decisions, good partnerships, and a great team. Probably not as much times a great team that you have come together. So Brigham is a success story. Hailun is also a success story, and its beginnings go back to, and let me put the history of Hailun and maybe the piano industry briefly into perspective. Historically, the piano industry had two centers, the European center and the American center, and that lasted up until the 1960s. So there were European makers and American makers pretty much equally strong. Now, the European side took a heavy hit during World War II. So many manufacturers out of business, didn't have the strength anymore. And at that time, between the European side and the American side, two makers, three makers remained strong in the United States. One of those makers started to dominate, simply based on their ability to produce and service globally and great marketing. So those companies were in the United States. Chickering was a great company back then still, and there were many other smaller ones. Chicken was one. The second one that was a big name was Ball. Probably know that name. And the third one that was able to really dominate the style. And they dominated the world. I mean, they had the ability to produce. And so that's how the industry kind of moved along until the 1960s, when companies out of Japan showed up. Especially one was had a funky name that nobody could say, nobody could remember. Today, everybody knows it and everybody remembers it. Yamaha. They have been producing everything under the world, but they started in pianos. I don't know if you're aware of that. If you remember the Yamaha logo, it's 3 tuning forks, right? So Yamaha came in to the detriment of our companies here. So many of the U.S. companies were not able to compete appropriately, and the Japanese Yamaha, and then Hawaii, which was an offspring of Yamaha, became kind of the dominant brands in the middle section. And well, recently another country came to the market, and that was China in the last 30 years. Now, China came to the market, and I want you to appreciate this. So Japan had a history of industrial production, design, engineering, even before World War II. China had a 3,000-year history, but they had no history about production, about anything. And they came out of Mao Zedong's training centers. So they were essentially very simple, often enough farmers that were given opportunity to do their own thing. And they found out one thing really fast during that time when China started to open up. They had one advantage, that when they're on the phone and they're broken Chinese talking to a European guy or an American guy, that made the deal, and that was price. So they had no training in marketing, no training in production, no training in engineering, but they understood how labor now is so cheap, and so you cannot hold it against them that they started producing cheap products, because that's what the customers here were reading. Now, if you go to Shanghai today, and I'm not diverting, I'm going to come and bring it all together here. If you go to Shanghai today, it's the nicest airport to fly into worldwide. It's 60 miles outside of Shanghai, which would in the United States be a nightmare. Train, get a cab, you step out and these guys have 100 feet down the road a magnetic elevation train that takes you those 60 miles in 6 minutes. And you're in the center of Shanghai 6 minutes later once you're out. And if you look at Shanghai, they have, it's New York times 50. You drive through, and Brigham was there. So they have come a long way. And if you go, they have 6 channels, TV channels. And 3 are like Chinese ones, and the other 3 are NBA, Mel Gibson movies, and so they watch our stuff, right? And they have one English speaking. So they're very much attuned to that. What I'm gearing up to say is that they have had a huge transformation, and our company is probably, if not, the example of the company that has been transformational in China. Let me tell you why. Hailun, so the Chinese government initially understood that they wanted to own all those little manufacturers. They thought owning is a key. But soon enough, they found out that owning is a hassle. So they said, no, we don't want to own you, but we'll tax you. That's the easier way of owning you, right? So they started taxing all the companies that were privately held. And our company, Hailun, was founded by a gentleman who approached the Chinese government and asked for permission to found his own company. And he focused initially, he was a graduate of a technical piano engineering school, and he initially focused on manufacturing parts. So the person's name, and I'm going to bring this picture up, I kind of have several presentations here. Is Mr. Chen. Hailun Chen had a technical mind, and so he produced parts for other big companies. Here we go. That's Mr. Chen, and he married his wife, Mrs. Chen. And so they became, he was the guy who forged out into the world, and she ran the factory. And she's a lady, she comes up to here, who is the fiercest little lady I have seen. So Mrs. Chen, that's the team. And when we came into the business, I had worked for another company. We were looking to find a place that we could source instruments at a quality level and with a sound that we liked. And we were myself, and there was another gentleman, and I'm going to go here back to our webpage and show you, give you an impression of those engineers. The gentleman was Peter Galetsky. This gentleman here. He was the 5th generation owner of a company called, I see it on my screen. I'm not sure why you don't see it on yours. Let's see. Here we go. Yes, that's him here. Yeah, it had become impossible to produce pianos in Vienna anymore for you. You had to be global, and he was not global. So we met up. I knew him from my days in Vienna, and we met up and we said, can we find a place where we can take the technology and start building pianos? And he found, through an acquaintance, Mr. Chen in China, who was building those parts, who was looking for someone to help him build pianos. So we came together, and I came a little bit later to the party. So they had already started and had developed some very good products when Peter approached me. And The other involved technicians in Skillness were George Emerson, Frank, he goes by Frank, you can see if I can get this. So Frank had worked at Baldwin for many years, and he brought all the know-how that Baldwin had to the table. And then we had Stephen Polillo, who had worked for Bechstein, which is a German maker. And he's a concert pianist. And so these three initially were the ones that started building tiny instruments. And from that humble beginning, I remember we built about 3,500 pianos. And when I became involved, the factory has grown and has become something of a unique situation, because even though we're built in China, our sound reflects the philosophy of Peter from Vienna, from Frank from Baldwin, and we'll see on the pianos, we can show design parts that are specific to American or European sound. And so when you sit down, Yamaha or Kawai, which are wonderful instruments, have a loud and piercing and projecting sound. And that's what artists, jazz artists especially, wanted. But we were looking for more the Viennese sound, the chamber music, the Schubert sound, if you will, the Mozart sound. We're in a room, that's not a 15,000 people concert hall, but a room that you make music together. So this was the core team that started producing instruments. And from that, we continued on improving what we have. Let me show you, give you also a feel for where we are in China. So if this is China here, we are, Shanghai is right on the eastern side, and Ningbo is just around on the other side of that bay. And here's the Yellow Sea, just beyond that. And here's the world's largest bridge that goes over that bay. It's about 102 kilometers, 102 miles. So when you're on that bridge, it's just a bridge on the water. There is no stopping there, so you either go or you swim. So it's pretty impressive. Let me go and switch now from, there'll be more to say about how we came here, maybe a couple more stories. So the first NAMM show. NAMM is the biggest trade show in the industry, where all makers of violins, guitars, flutes, all congregate. I remember our first exhibit there, and we had a merchant from Texas who came and said, your piano sounds so good. They've been so well engineered. The sound is so different. Why don't you call them a German name? Why don't you seduce the customer and kind of tell the story? This is like, and so he said Steinman or Steinberg or Stein, something that sounds, and I said, Steve Merrill, he's going to our factory, he's now our dealer, so I said to him, Steve, well, I'm sure we would sell lots more than the Hailun name here, right? But let me ask you, what would sell better, the Steinman name or the Yamaha name? He said, well, of course Yamaha. I said, why? Because it's a brand. People trust it. And so I said, you see, people will trust us. Give us a couple more years. And initially, many merchants thought that we were crazy to go and brand our pianos with the name of the owner, Hailun Chen. But we did it, and we felt it was the way of integrity, and of being upfront, and of stating who we are, and presenting ourselves on the merits of what we have done, and not on a marketing ploy or a story that might not be completely true. So that was the story, and from that I'm going to shift now and show you a couple of things about our pianos that we have incorporated and that make us different. So this is an internal presentation that a delay that the Stradings uses. So I'm gonna, it's not very strict, but it has all the important points. So I'm gonna rely on that to guide us through. So we had several models that we slowly upgraded to come to what are core models, the HU1, which is a 48-inch instrument, the HU5, 50-inch, the HU7, which is our biggest one, the 52-incher, and the small studio university or institutional one. Move to these parts. So the HU and the HU5 data, I'd like you just to take a couple of words. Kind of wet sand cast plate. And I'll jump back to this and explain what that means. They have a full perimeter plate as well. I explain that as well. Just remember that. And we have a special soundboard that's called a meniscus soundboard. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit as well. These were all innovations, some of them significant ones, that influenced the sound of instruments. I'm going to explain to you the meniscus soundboard first. So one critical part, or the heart of the piano, is a soundboard. And usually, soundboards that are produced to certain specifications, like a certain humidity level, become influenced by the environment that they're in. So if you buy a piano that's been produced, let's say, in Europe, at a high humidity level, and you bring it to Utah in the summer, it might be okay. But in the winter, when it's cold, humidity decreases, you put it in your heating system, slowly humidity will be drawn out of the soundboard, and it will develop cracks. So little parts. That's a good part. Most of the time, those don't matter. But sometimes they do. They loosen the crown and the energy that the soundboard has to vibrate. So one of the features that we introduced was what we call the meniscus soundboard. That is, we have the spruce part, which takes about 95% of the soundboard. And then, I'm not sure if you can discern that, but there's like a little skin level. It's about 2.5%, 2.5%. That is like a skin over the soundboard itself. What this does, it's like a skin. It protects the core from those variations. It gives it that little bit of edge. Let me give you, and the benefits are that that skin is put on about 50 degrees. This is about 50 degrees. How would you put it in English? Shift from the main grain. So it doesn't, grains are not going the same direction. Hence, if the one wood starts to pull, the other one pulls slightly somewhere else. In that way, it gives it better strength. We have found very good experience. For instruments sound fabulous. So we have had no impact on the sound. And we have had limited issues with cracks of soundboards, especially these states, Nevada, Phoenix, all the way up to Canada or Alaska. Now, these are still sensitive, so we have had issues, but they were minuscule compared to the amount of instruments we have shipped. And that was an innovation that we were the first ones to implement in this nuanced way. The ribs are, we have 11 ribs. There's a logic to that from a logical perspective. Our quarter saw, I don't know if, are you familiar with quarter saw valve? You know what quarter saw means? So this little schematic explains it. So here quarter saw is they cut in, and all the rings are lined up in the line essentially. Whereas if it's back sawn, the lines are, the gear rings are not in the line, they're kind of they're prone to bending, and we don't want that. We want them to be soft, but not giving in. So that's why you have to have 400 screws. Any manufacturer that builds anything of the pianos will produce them in this way. All right, and then our instruments have iron cast frames that have wet sand cast plates. There's two processes that are done. There's the V process, where hot metal is shot into plastic mold, and the gases are sucked out. It's faster. It lends itself to true mass production, and requires less finishing work because the plastic mold is just right there. Looks cleaner for sure. However, European manufacturers have never done Pro frames. Never. All the high manufacturers, Steiner, Bösdorfer, Sauter, Fazioli, all do wet sand. That's how it's not done. So you have wet sand, that's special sand, that is imprinted with a mold that's made out of wood. Then that wood mold is taken off, and then the iron is poured in. It's slower, it needs longer times to dry. But people say they have differences in sound qualities. This has been argued for ages. We have decided we're going to stick with the European side. The V process is done by the Japanese companies, and successfully so, the pianos. We went with the European side. One important detail difference. We'll go and explain full perimeter here in a little bit and move forward. What is important though is that when you get the plate and it's treated, that you put those points where all the parts will go in the precise right angle and positions. So we use in our factory a 5-axis CNC machine. These are computer numeric machines, so they have exactly, they work with laser. Graham has seen them. I think you might even shot a video of them. They exactly put all the positions, the pins, where things go in, so that is standardized. And that's truly the important part in factories. So many factories, even in Europe, don't use that. So that provides the constancy of the resilience of the instrument. Our strings are made in Germany. Restaurant is a provider of poly strings throughout the world. We use the highest grade that they provide. And here's a feature that's, again, that we started. Here's a step that we learned. We had to patent things, and we didn't patent that part. So once we left it unpatented, it became common knowledge.